What's up gamers, DreamcastGuy here, talking today about Doom Eternal, because this game, despite the fact that it's so beloved and celebrated, it's also got some drama around it that may end up leading into a very messy court case. So when this game came out, pretty much everybody agrees that it is super good. It's got gory action, fast combat, some really glorious glory kills. But I think a lot of us can agree that part of the reason that Doom Eternal is so great is the soundtrack. It is just full of ripping songs that just make you really get encouraged to blow stuff up and go to the depths of hell. And that is because of one main man, which is Mick Gordon. This guy is arguably a mega genius of music. This guy knows how to just really compose stuff that makes you want to keep playing the game. And because of this, one of the things they started doing is, as they led up to the release of Doom Eternal, all the developers kept typing up a special collector's edition. If you bought the collector's edition, not only would you get the game and some collectibles and stuff like that, you'd also get a perfect mix of the soundtrack, an ability to listen to each of the songs in a better fidelity. That way you could kind of just, celebrate what makes this song so good. Well, here's the issue. When it actually came out, the soundtrack completely sucked to a baffling degree. So here's an article about it. This is over on Bloody Disgusting. A lot of people were talking about this though. Doom Eternal composer Mick Gordon frustrated with soundtrack's final mix. So I want to scroll down here to his official statements. A lot of people were actually reaching out and kind of talking to Bethesda about the very low quality simply because they were disappointed. It's not necessarily that they were mad, it's that they were promised that this would turn out to be good and it just flat out sucked. So here's one of the tweets. Mick Gordon is a far more talented audio engineer than me. It's not even close, and that's what makes this especially frustrating. I expected much better from him. Again, the music itself is phenomenal, but this mix on the official soundtrack is frankly terrible. And then Mick Gordon randomly replied, I didn't mix those, and wouldn't have done that. You'll be able to spot the small handful of tracks I mixed, Meat Hook, Command and Control, etc. Now this is beginning to really stir things up because he's basically saying that he wasn't able to make this the way he wanted. And people even pointed out the fact that this is kind of weird because he obviously took this soundtrack incredibly seriously, going so far as to have heavy metal choirs. He wanted this to be the biggest, craziest freaking set of tunes ever to be on this side of hell. And that makes sense. But things began to change a little bit more because there were some people talking about, there was like an unsubstantiated post saying that he was saying that I'll never work with Bethesda again. And then suddenly, just a few minutes ago, there is this. So I'm not going to go through it all because this is a very big, very, very wordy explanation, but this is Marty Stratton. Marty Stratton is one of the main people over at Bethesda and is very directly in control of what's going on with Doom Eternal. This is the man who's basically making sure that everything runs as smoothly as possible. Well, he decided to write a giant open letter saying, hey, it's Mick that screwed this up. It's not us. You can't be mad at us. We had to make this soundtrack the way it was because he just flat out dropped the ball. Let's look at the opening statement here and then kind of dive into the meat of it and how I think that this is probably going to land itself in court for sure. Over the past couple weeks, I've seen lots of discussions centered around the release of the Doom Eternal original game soundtrack, the OST. While many fans like the OST, there is speculation and criticism around the fact that the game's talented and popular composer, Mick Gordon, edited and mixed only 12 of the 59 tracks, the remainder being edited by our lead audio designer here at id. Some have suggested that we've been careless with or disrespectful of the game's music. Others have speculated that Mick wasn't given the time or creative freedom to deliver something different or better. The fact is, none of that is true. So I just want to take a break here. People have actually been on the Reddit showing that scientifically, this mix has been screwed up. You can actually, if you look at a lot of the side-by-side comparisons, basically, the way that they did this is compressed, it's lazy, and to be quite frank, it seems like whoever did mix the soundtrack probably did not have much experience with music design in general. Now, I really actually think that Marty Stratton makes a lot of very strong points in here, but I want to show a couple things is basically he had a bunch of back and forths about how this should be handled, what this should be done, the upcoming due dates, and the biggest thing is that they actually had a very strict guideline to this. So a lot of this is very interesting because he goes in depth about the business side of how this transaction has been taking place, some of the problems they had specifically with Mick Gordon, but the most interesting aspect of this is he kind of talks about the legal trouble they've been running into. The biggest thing you need to realize is that in America, we have the BBB, the Better Business Bureau. It basically makes a bunch of consumer protections. If you promise something in your game, you absolutely have to deliver it, or fans are allowed to sue you. And this has actually happened with stuff like Aliens Colonial Marines. Yes, that's right. If you put something in your trailer, or you say something's going to be in your game, you can absolutely be screwed over if you don't finish it in time. And so, this is where they start talking about that, about how delays absolutely could not be tolerated. So throughout this public statement, what's interesting to me is that they really reveal more of the legal side of how this is all going on, but they kind of throw Mick under the bus. Hearing their side of it, it definitely doesn't make Gordon look good. At E3 last year, we announced that the OST would be included with the Doom Eternal Collector's Edition. At that point in time, we didn't have Mick under contract for the OST because of ongoing issues receiving the music we needed for the game. We did not want to add the distraction at that time. After discussions with Mick in January of this year, we reached a general agreement on the terms of Mick to deliver the OST by early March, in time to meet the consumer commitment of including the digital OST with the Doom Eternal soundtrack. That all makes sense. They want to have it packaged and together and ready to be delivered at launch. The terms of the agreement, Mick, were similar to the agreement of Doom 2016 in that it required him to deliver a minimum of 12 tracks, but added bonus payment for on-time delivery. The agreement also gave him complete creative control over what he delivers, which means that according to this, Mick was able to choose which tracks he loved the most, which ones he wanted to put the most time into, how he wanted to mix them, so in case he maybe wanted to re-record sections of it, or if he wanted to try and bump up different audio levels. Mick really seemingly had total freedom to do whatever he wanted with this, positive or negative. He could have made certain ones good, or tried to just improve ones that he wanted to polish up. And apparently, he wasn't able to deliver it. What's interesting is, throughout this, they basically talk about how the big problem is that Mick was just slow. For whatever reason, maybe he was distracted, maybe he wasn't doing his best. It sounds like the problem mostly comes down to the fact that they were just not getting anything from Mick on schedule. On February 24th, Mick reached out to communicate that he and his team were fine with the terms of the agreement, but there was a lot more work involved than anticipated, a lot of content to wade through, and while he was making progress, it was taking longer than expected. He apologized and asked that ideally he be given an additional 4 weeks to get everything together. He offered that extra time would allow him to provide upwards of 30 tracks in a runtime of over 2 hours, including all music from the game, arranged in soundtrack format, and he felt it would be best to represent the score in the best way possible. Now that sounds great. Mick's request was accommodated, allowing for an even long extension of 6 weeks. With the new final ender, so it sounds like he definitely got a lot of stuff that makes it good for him. And then here's the thing. I'm not going to read all this, but he kept slowing down. It sounds like Mick kept doing less work, hitting less deadlines. He kept trying to just not have enough time to get things done. And so because of it, instead of being able to do the full soundtrack and get everything done, get his bonus, get a giant paycheck, and of course make Doom fans extremely happy, because let's remember, that's the most important part of this, is making sure Doom fans, like myself, are as pleased as possible. It sounds like he just did the minimum. He did the 12 tracks, he didn't do anything more, and then it got handed off to this guy named Chad. I let him know that Chad had started work on the backup tracks, but reiterated that our expectation and preference was to release what he had delivered. Several days later, Mick suggested that he and Chad, the person working on the backup, had combined what each was working on to come up with a more comprehensive release. So this guy named Chad was the guy who actually did it. And I don't know what Chad does for a living. I'm not sure what position Chad holds. I'm sure that Chad's a great employee, but clearly he wasn't able to make this as good as he probably hoped. And that's what makes this the saddest part, is that I don't think that anybody was lazy. I don't think that anybody tried to screw this up, but clearly the finalized version of it is just not good. The final note I really want to make here is just the fact that at least Mick shares our disappointment. In some level, a lot of these statements here at the end basically talks about how Mick was desperately emailing a lot of his bosses, his directors, a lot of his cohorts inside of id, saying that he was extremely disappointed with the final product. He was basically saying, I wanted this to be good, I wanted to at least have 12 perfect tracks, and yet there's 59 of them, and they're kind of a sloppy mess. And so what kind of gets me is that I guess what really kind of bothers me the most is that this drama sucks. Whoever managed to drop the ball most absolutely deserves the blame, but what bothers me is that fans, at the end of the day, are the ones who got screwed over. The people who bought this collector's edition did not get a proper soundtrack. You basically got compressed MP3s in the lowest quality version for the highest possible price. I don't think that what you can say about the collector's edition, it's just not properly complete. Now, maybe Marty's lying. Maybe this is all just a big giant id cover-up, but from what it seems like, everybody kinda lost. Marty had to rush a new soundtrack, Mick, the original composer, wasn't able to deliver the product and thus ended up seeing his work mollified in a way he didn't like, and of course, the fans got a subpar soundtrack. Everybody loses, there is no happy ending, and I guess that's the way the real world goes. Thanks so much for watching, gamers. What are your thoughts on this? Give this video a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and of course, do me a big favor and keep dreaming. Also, go for a long walk. I'm seriously asking you to do that. Do a walk. Stay in shape. Just because we're in quarantine doesn't mean we all gotta get fat and unhealthy. Stay healthy so you can game longer. Much love. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.